I'm Jane Sachs. I'm a data center referendum petition volunteer. And this is Steve Jacobczyk, who you probably, or many of you know from Citizens for Responsible Growth. And of course, here's Jeff Holtzinger, who I'm sure you all know. Steve and I are going to be moderating. I've asked Steve to give me a hand with this. I'm going to ask Jeff to introduce himself in a few minutes, because he's going to do a lot better job of that than I will. Let me not forget, this is Abby Pedinati. She's going to be videoing, just so you all know, it's going to be videotaped. And I'm hoping that you all have brought good questions, and also, if you want to have some brief dialogue with Jeff, that's ideal. I was hoping that this could be as informal as possible. Steve and I are going to try to limit our moderating comments to keeping the conversation on track, focused on Jeff, and also in terms of time, because we only have a couple of hours, so we may need to cut people off if things go on too long. But mostly we want you to have an opportunity to have some dialogue with Jeff. Okay, we also are hoping that people have questions about issues other than the data centers, although we know the data centers are pretty front and center. But it's important, I think, and I'm sure many of you agree, that we have a full picture of Jeff, and what kind of a county executive he would be. Okay, so I guess with that, Stephen, do you have something to add?
No, all I would do is just reinforce what you've already said, that the best way that these things work is through dialogue. You go back and forth. If you ask a question, Jeff gives you an answer, you kind of got to follow up to what his answer was, that's cool, all right? And then so that way it's back and forth. As long as we stay reasonably respectful, which I'm sure won't be a problem here, everything should run pretty smoothly. The other thing that you should try not to do is if we're kind of in a subject line, like say we're talking about education or something, and until that category or that lane has been asked and answered a couple of times, try not to switch back and forth and stay consistent. And that way, at the end of the day, we'll know how Jeff feels about more than a couple of things, which is wonderful. And also the other thing that works out is I think Jeff will get a chance to know what you guys think about things. So we can take advantage of this situation and learn more about each other.
Okay, so with that, let's get going.
I'll probably sit down in a couple minutes. My name is Jeff Holtzinger. I'm glad that they went over the kind of pictures looking like that old show Crossfire. I'm a lifelong resident of Frederick County. I've been married to 38 years to my high school girlfriend, and we have 4 great kids. They all, very lucky for us, are still around the area. I have spent pretty much my entire career in Frederick County working as a civil engineer and a lawyer. Most of my work is local. Most of my work has involved municipal or county government. So I do civil engineering, I do some structural, and I practice law. I still do both. At one point, I was the city engineer of the city of Frederick and had to deal with an issue that'll probably be near and dear to the hearts of the people that are working on the data center. I had to deal with a very severe water supply situation. As I was coming in to be the city engineer, there had been a misevaluation of the city's withdrawal permit on the Monocacy River. As it turned out, the Monocacy River was what's called a zero safe yield source. So basically, the Monocacy River cannot be counted on for planning or platting or permitting. However, the city can probably draw on it. Maybe later on I'll get into why this is relevant. Probably 80 or 90% of the time, the city cannot draw. They cannot withdraw water during the 7Q10 and still maintain adequate flow to maintain the quality of life. The 7Q10 is the 10-year, 7-day low flow for the river, and so that's why that river is a zero safe yield source. So the city's rescuer in this case was Frederick County. The city was able to, as I left the city engineer's office, they were not able to resolve things with the county. I ended up running for mayor in the city, not necessarily because I wanted to get in politics, but because I saw what was happening with the administration there just could not get along with the county and wasn't making any progress and was making the issue more about politics than resolving the issue. Ended up getting elected as mayor. We were able to took office in January, and I think in March or April we had the Potomac River Water Supply Agreement in place. That's important now because that agreement gives the city the legal right to 5 million gallons a day of average daily demand of the county's Potomac River supply. I had a couple other issues that I had run on. Most of them revolved around public works and infrastructure. That's basically what a lot of my focus will be on this time as well. But I was able to get a couple of big projects done. In addition to the Potomac River Water Supply Agreement, we were able to permit the center section of Monocacy Boulevard, which was the section of Monocacy Boulevard most fraught with environmental permitting issues. Signed the construction contract for that project my last day in office. Was able to get gas house pipe road improvements and Shookstown road improvements done. They had been stalled for various reasons. Got a big turn lane that had been problematic on Apostletown Pike done, and we got a parking garage built downtown here. Last thing I accomplished, and that was kind of my last goal, was we acquired the Hargett Farm on the southwest side of the city to make a regional park. A little disappointed it's taken this long to get anywhere with it, but they look like they're finally starting to get somewhere with with putting improvements into the park. So I decided not to run again, and because I had accomplished what I set out to do, and it was never my goal to be a career politician. Went back out to practice back in the private sector, practice law and civil engineering. Fast forward to that was 16 years ago. As I said, I'm a lifelong resident of the county. I don't like the direction the county's been going in for at least probably the last 10 years. Looks like we're walking into some of the very same issues that motivated me to run for mayor. We're not doing a good job with growth and how we manage it now. Would it really hurt my feeling if I never built a house again in Frederick County? Probably not, but it's gonna happen. We're gonna have growth. I think actually, Betty, did I somewhere see you live in Woman's Mill or that area?
Yeah, in Dearborn.
Okay, near that then, that wasn't it, but that was my first job.
Yeah, right across the street.
That was the first job. Warman's Mill was the first job I worked on when I came out of college as an engineer up here in Frederick. But I see us making the same mistakes that have been made down the road. We're not getting on top of the infrastructure, and pretty soon we become an undesirable place to live. And one of the problems is we are such a desirable place to move to. It's a great county. It's a great quality of life, and that is a large reason why I'm running. I want to see it stay that way for my kids and my grandchildren. I have 2 grandchildren now. I'd love for them to be able to stay here and take over our family farm and hopefully their children. I just don't think we're doing a very good job at all at managing growth. Data centers, I know a lot of folks are in here, are part of that issue. So that's why I've jumped in. I'm not charismatic. I'm frankly pretty boring because my goal is to stick to local government issues. I want to do a better job running the government. I think we could run Frederick County government way more efficiently, way less cost, and not have to cut any real services that you count on for your day-to-day life. I really think the great majority of the issues, if not just about all of them, on the local level are bipartisan. Your property tax increases don't discriminate based on your party affiliation. Sitting in traffic doesn't care what party affiliation you are. So I really think the great number of things that really matter to people day to day are very much bipartisan issues. So in a nutshell, that's why I'm running. And like I said, I've done it before. I did pretty much the same thing as mayor. I came in, we were able to cut some unnecessary layers of government, which didn't affect services, and they weren't really positions that were working day to day for people that lived in the city. And we were able to cut the tax rate twice. Now, the tax rate doesn't mean your taxes were cut, but it did decrease increase the rated, you know, how much quicker you were increasing your taxes. That's a whole other issue I think that people get a little lost on, and if someone has a question about it, they'll certainly be willing to elaborate on that later on. But you know, notwithstanding that the tax rate wasn't increased this year, our taxes went up because everybody's assessments are up, and I'm sure everybody got their tax bill and saw the increase. With that, what do you want me to tell you? Got any specific questions or topics, or are you gonna take it from there?
If I can help here.
Yep.
When you say that you wanna help with or be more efficient in the day-to-day running of the county and maintain things, is there anything specific that you see being done now that you would change?
Well, I mean, I don't want to call out specific departments necessarily, because I think that's wrong to the people in my work. But let me put it this way. If you are not someone who 8 hours a day is spending, you know, at your job doing things that help the people in Frederick County day to day, I gotta ask why you're there. And so there's a lot of positions there that I don't think that the staffing has grown tremendously. And a lot of the times the devil is in the details. I was a municipal employee. I was a city engineer. You know, I have a pretty good feel for, you know, how many people you need to do this and how you do that. I certainly see, you know, in many cases, there's no way, if I was running that type of division, I would need that many people. And unfortunately, that's just the bottom line. So, yes.
In addition to inefficiencies that we see in the county government, from a lot of people I've talked to, the county staff is really uncomfortable saying anything to the powers that be that they know will be not accepted, or in other words, a lot of people feel harassed and are afraid to speak up.
I think that is probably true, and we've got a great example. We had an employee who was a great asset to the county. I know, because I've worked with folks in the county government for so long, I know quite a few people. And my opponent in the primary, Diane Fouché, had the, stood by her integrity, and because of that, she lost her job. And that's a shame, because the people I know that work for the county said she was great at her job. She was a great person to work with. But because she wouldn't go along with something that didn't meet the purchasing rules, she was terminated. Now, that's my opinion. We'll see how she's got something pending, so I don't want to say too much, but.
So the second part of my question is that, so how would you begin to build trust with the employees while you're having to look at where the inefficiencies are and all that?
Well, what I think you need to do a lot of times with employees is give them the freedom to use their training and common sense. And also tell them, if there's a problem, or if you have a question, delegate it up, and that we're not there to blame, place blame on employees. So if I were to say, hey, well, I really think you should look at this way, and then that blows up, I'm gonna say, then you blame me, because if I made the call or I put pressure on you, that's how I establish trust. I don't ask someone to do something and then look to, cast the blame to them if something goes wrong. That's how I would. And I think that what the employees mostly respect is being straight with them. Just being straight, being able to talk to the person. I don't know, I'm not there, I don't know how many people can talk directly to the county executive. But I don't think Frederick County government's gotten a lot bigger, but I don't think it's that big that the executive should be in an ivory tower and, not approachable by employees. I'm sure she's very pleasant and everything else if she, happened to be at a picnic or something. But, this is.
For sure.
So, one of the folks I used to work with at the county, probably one of the smartest people I ever worked with at the county, a guy named Mike Marshner. I was talking to him one day. This doesn't quite on your question, but I think it a little bit addresses, somewhat addresses it. We were talking about department heads, and he said, you don't need professional managers, you need working managers. And I would analogize that to the county executive. You don't need a professional politician, you need a working county manager, someone who understands the operation below. So when I was talking to this, Mr. Marshner at the county, he said, you gotta have department heads that understand their department and what they do. And in my view, have to have a county executive that understands the operation. And by understanding what someone does, you know, being able to go out, say, to the guys on DPW crews and understand what they have to put up with, or guys in the wastewater or water treatment plant, if you demonstrate to them that you know, are trying to either learn or understand what they do and understand the issues they face, I think you can build trust with county and, you know, county employees that way. But you can't be that way if you're just out being a professional politician.
Let me just interject for a minute. Can everybody here in the back, in particular, hear the questions that are being asked? Right, if you can't hear the questions, I know, but
I think it's gonna be
people back
annoying,
there
it'll be
can't.
so loud.
If you can't hear, please raise your hand, and that'll indicate to the person speaking that somehow. the
Just
voice
yell,
has to
speak
get
up,
there.
that's fine.
Right.
Yes.
As far as the government and appointments and things like that go, are you willing to set aside party affiliations to make government employees, you know, a little bit more comfortable
Oh,
with
absolutely.
their choices?
Absolutely.
I mean, have
Yeah.
you vetted different people? Like, have you already been speaking to different
No,
people across lines?
I'm not gonna get ahead of myself. I know enough people there. Frankly, there's a lot of people, I have a lot of faith in there already. I know who does what, more or less, or I can, you know, I can find that out, but, you know, I appointed, when I was mayor, I appointed Kelly Russell to a commission because she wanted to be on it. Kelly's not, you know, she's not the same party as I am. I worked pretty closely, not employees, but I worked pretty closely with a majority Democrat Board of Aldermen, and we got things done. Yeah, do we have disagreements on stuff? But we left it in the boardroom.
So you are bipartisan in that effort?
Yeah, to me, once the election's over, that should be gone. And you should not hold someone's party affiliation against them. It'll be pretty much, this is what I would say, if you're doing your job and you're doing it well and honestly, no problem. Yeah.
Speaking of growth, what was your position on Steve McKay's moratorium proposals?
I'll be honest, I did not see the you know, I followed it, I guess, slightly, but if the moratorium was based on not having adequate public facilities, then, and depending on the scope of it,
Yes.
that I don't disagree. I will say this though, one thing that worries me about that is if you put a blanket moratorium on, Ryan Homes or some of these other big NVR, whoever, those big places, and I don't work for people, I'm so small, I work for small builders, that'll pull a small builder out of a business in a heartbeat. So if, let's say you had a small builder, this is a typical case that I might have, had 5 lots. They spent the money to do the engineering, they've put in, you know, facilities or started on that, and then there's a moratorium, they're done. They've invested their life savings in those 5 lots. So I just think you gotta be careful, and it may be something where you say, nothing more than this many lots or this many lots a year. And that, if it's reasonable, you know, it's certainly something I would consider, but it's.
Small builders were exempt.
Yeah, but what you run into there, here's my lawyer hat coming out. You gotta watch doing that because then you will get sued and then they'll overturn the whole thing. So you gotta be very careful how you do those things. Because I think you might end up causing a bigger problem. But yeah, I think, so one thing I did at the city for years, they had not been able to get an adequate public facilities ordinance in place, and I was able to bring an adequate public facilities ordinance forward, and that is in place at the city now. So, Robin.
Yeah, Robin Ficker. I came up 270 to get here, and it was bumper to bumper. Then it eased up a little bit at Frederick, and then bam, I hit the 15 and wanted to take that Jefferson Street exit. It wasn't moving. What's your ideas about that situation, that gridlock?
So one thing is we do study after study after study, and we don't seem to make any progress on getting towards where we're going to do the work. But that is going to be tough. The best thing we can do, we have to advocate with our state, our delegation here, and I think they're all for it. But we got to do whatever we can to try to persuade the governor to step it up. And I've seen the whole thing with the studies before, and it really is, if you heard the term paralysis by analysis, it just gets to be that. And Little bit of a long-winded explanation, but when I was doing the center section of Monocacy Boulevard, you know, I had the team together from finance, we're gonna evaluate who can bid and all these things. And of course, they're coming up with all the, and I'm sorry if anybody works for one of the big consulting firms down in Baltimore, but they're always like, oh, they've got this on their resume, they got this. And I said, yeah, but last year when we used them on a wastewater plant, they were they overcharged us, the project is not the schedule, you know, and there was a number of them that we just had problems with. I said, we're gonna open this up so some local people, plus the benefit of keeping local people to work. So something that would have probably taken months to permit and would not have thought outside the box, or waiting many more months or years to permit, we used a local firm. If I needed a meeting, it wasn't 3 weeks later. That afternoon, I could call them up. And we got and they let us do 30% design in-house. No consultant from down the road was gonna put up with us saving that type of money. And so we got the thing done a lot quicker because we didn't have paralysis by analysis. And another bonus, we had to cross Carroll Creek. This consultant said, hey, you don't need to use a standard bridge there. We think we can use concrete arch sections. Saved us $1 million on the construction costs. Now, had I used a big firm, like the state highway guys do, like are doing the designs for 15 and everywhere else in Maryland, they would have never recommended that because they weren't gonna cut their bridge section out of that work, I guarantee you that. So that kind of gets back to some of the, you know, a lot of these things, how you can save cost at government, the devil's in the details, but it takes experience to be able to know, you know, what buttons like that to push. And that turned out to be a great project. So back to your bigger question, we've got to do a great job advocating and really push it. Unfortunately, being who we are, I don't think the governor is gonna be too concerned about us in Frederick County. He's not when it comes to data centers and putting power lines over people's property. So the next thing I think we've got to look at is we've got to start taking a better, and that goes back to the infrastructure issue. We got to take a better mile-high look and see if there's possibilities to start getting traffic off of 15 so they can get to their destination further out in the county, more like the wheel and the hub type thing. There may not be, but I think the potential is we could make some road improvements to higher class roads in the county or even some smaller state highways, get with them, and maybe people can peel off before they get coming through the city of Frederick to be able to get where they are. Another problem is a lot of that's pass-through traffic. So, you know, you've got to evaluate all those things. Again, it's in the details and knowing what questions to ask, you know, and who to approach about how we can look at these things from a bigger scale. But I think that's gonna be one of the answers to 15 is we've got to figure out ways where further out when they're coming from DC, when folks are coming from DC or Baltimore, how they can break off that coming through 15. Yeah, I'll get you guys. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. My name's Curry Kai. I've got a two-part question. We are the rapidly developing county in the state right now. We are growing. Maryland uses over 6 times the amount of power it produces. How would you, as county executive, negotiate the line between installing renewable energy facilities and battery storage within the existing farming community? That's number one. And number two, we're talking about needing new housing, especially lower cost housing and middle cost housing. Are you willing or interested, or would you pursue ways of incentivizing new housing to eliminate gas usage and make them solar ready?
Both areas probably tough for the county. They're good questions, but tough for the county. So I think you can provide for that in your zoning ordinances and things like that. So you can provide for that. How much it'll be used, like for instance, electric cars now seem to be not as in favor, at least my observation. You see the F-150 Lightning, they're not even producing them anymore.
No, but they brought the Chevy Bolt back because people demanded it. I drive a 10-year-old Chevy Bolt.
Well, that may be the case, so, but I think the answer generally is you provide for that, and you provide in your zoning ordinance that people can uses, and maybe you provide some incentives, like either review time, and that would be similar to, because a lot of the expense when you're going through those processes is getting the plans through the system. A lot of the lag is the time to review, so it might not be a great help, but it would be part of the way there to help you, as much as the county executive or working with the council would have in their control as a local government. You provide the ability to build those within the local ordinances. As far as battery storage on farmlands, I think, you can look at that, but then you've also got to be concerned about environmental issues as well. So I think you just have to do an excellent job with your regulations. Affordable housing, I know that's a big topic and it's a tough nut for the local government. Unfortunately, just not efficient at building those type of things. So I think what you've got to do are similar things with your ordinances. You have to look at ways that you can incentivize private, the private sector to build these things, but some of that is going to be, you're going to have to, a lot of the expense is the infrastructure. So are you sacrificing adequate public facilities if you do things to promote, the affordable housing? I don't know the numbers yet, but I would be very interested to see what the cost is over at the Prospect Center to do that, and what it's costing per unit compared to what it would, is it really gonna be affordable unless it's heavily subsidized? And the other part of the affordable housing is, we talk about that, but like I said, I've lived here my whole life. As I get near to being able to pay my house off, am I gonna be able to afford to stay here because of the taxes on the house? Every year, I get significant increases in my tax bill, but I'm getting nothing more for it. We have to have taxes, I understand that, but why are we having these significant increases each year if we're not getting anything more for it? And that makes it unaffordable for the people that live here and have been here their whole life. And I don't necessarily think that's fair as well. But the short answer on the affordable housing, I think it's very tough. I think the government has very limited options. It's a nice thought, and I think everything, I think it's well intended. But I think those projects end up being very costly. I'll tell you an example in the city of Frederick. The city bought a couple houses to rehab up off of South Market Street, and I think it was South Market. They just ended up being, the cost to do those houses ended up being at least twice what the houses were worth when we were done. And so that, you've got to avoid situations like that. If you look in the city of Frederick here on South Street and some other places, you've got some pretty high density housing going up, but my concern is how are they gonna handle the traffic? And I know, some of it will be they won't have as many cars, but the reality is most people are still gonna have at least one car, and you're gonna have a tremendous amount of traffic, more traffic on South Street and Patrick. So it's a very, very tough balance. It's certainly not something that should be ignored, but
There's nothing to prevent the planning department from approving a planning development, a new development, with a requirement to have a specific number of affordable housing units. And the builder will just have to make it work. There's nothing that prevents the county government from doing that.
well, no, there's nothing that will, but the reality is, if you, let me think on they're not gonna, they are not gonna build units that they're gonna lose money on. And it's some of the costs they're looking at, they're not gonna, they're in the business to make money, there's no doubt about that. So it's very difficult for them to do that, and you're probably referring to the fee in lieu of. So I think it's just a very tough thing to do. I would look at some possibilities with some of the existing organizations in place that do have some know-how about building things, like Habitat for Humanity or the Housing Authority, and look for some opportunities with them. To me, that is gonna be the best option. They're not huge agencies, but to me, that would probably be the best option to feasibly provide some affordable housing. I will also tell you, there's other things, these aren't the control of the county government, and I stay the heck away from it, but the landlord-tenant regulations are it's very tough to be a landlord in Maryland, and I understand understand why, they have some of the regulations, but those costs all get passed along. And I think when they're passing this legislation, they sometimes don't think how that affects, tenants, which is, certainly gonna be affordable rental units. It's certainly gonna be part of affordable housing, and they make it, it's very difficult to be a landlord in Maryland. And then, you have these things in the city that I think they're well intended, but some of the rental licensing stuff and things like that make people think twice about having properties they wanna rent. Yes, ma'am.
You spoke about traffic, it's a problem. As long as we remain an auto-centric focus, how do you address the situation of traffic? Do we just continue to build, widen, expand all of our roads? What are other options available that you see?
Well, the first thing is, we've gotta get, in my mind, and there may be some, I think there are some folks that have some pretty good experience. One thing I saw at the city, I lobbied to get the first traffic engineer when I was a city engineer. We gotta be better at being able to do hardcore traffic engineering, and that means signal timing and things like that, things that'll make traffic, for instance, on the Golden Mile, the timing sequences are horrible there. Now that's a state road, but we were able to work cooperative state roads on some signal things. I was fortunate enough to get a traffic engineer that really understood that stuff. That's an area where we gotta be willing to pay someone who has experience, and again, getting into those details to be able to do things like that, to do it. Some of it will be widening, but you're right, we're not gonna widen our way out of 270, I don't think, and we don't have control of that anyways. That is something, that I think maybe more people being allowed to telecommute. And you're right, in the last question, to allow, to allow a little more, the different type of vehicles, and to allow maybe, more units closer in to the centers where you have that. Unfortunately, what I see is, though, when you have the opportunity to build that type of density, but it's next to, more affluent neighborhoods, that's not gonna happen. And a prime example of that, and not necessarily that I wanted to see it, but if you remember where Zimmerman Forest was in the city of Frederick, I mean, that's within walking distance of so many things. That's big houses. That's not high density. They tend to stick the high density out to places like western part of the city, or, places where the folks there don't have as much, sway. But really, if you think about it, that was walking distance to just about everything, and they didn't take advantage of the opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
So along the same line, having businesses come into the county to provide jobs, that people wanna live here and work here, what's your thoughts on recruiting multiple employers?
Well, that again probably goes back to the climate, the business climate that you see here when you're going through the planning and permitting stage. So it's always a balance. You've gotta make sure you're protecting health, safety, and general welfare, and the taxes, frankly. So when someone comes here, they don't wanna be stuck 2 years in the process of, say, they're building a building or retrofitting a building to get permits to be able to open a business. So I think you have to be able to respond to people and yet still make sure you're doing your job as far as reviewing to protect public health, safety, and welfare, general welfare. And again, that's experience. That's knowing what you can, knowing what you can push faster without sacrificing those things. But to me, it's how quickly they can come and get opened as a business, and how they're gonna be treated when they get here. And another thing is businesses that are already here. You gotta make sure you're also trying to retain the businesses that are here as well. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Karen Russell, and I'm on the Green Infrastructure Advisory Group for the county. I also teach a biodiversity segment to master naturalists. I love the Green Infrastructure Plan that we've passed. I think the planning office did a wonderful job. concerned about is its implementation. Because what it really does is it says, we need to protect our environment, we need to protect our water sources, we need to protect the wildlife that's here, we need to preserve the natural environment, because essentially it's our life support system. And I don't see, any office in the county government that is heavyweight enough to speak on behalf of the environment and to get this plan implemented. I'm seeing data centers, I'm seeing economic development office people come and advocate for what they want. And because it's money, you know, it's, oh, we need to have jobs, we need to have, but what about the environment? What about-
Unfortunately, some of the same group that you work with is pushing the IW2 plan. And they're pushing it, notwithstanding that they don't know how the infrastructure is gonna be provided. They talk about, our agricultural heritage, and then they turn and, look to rezone. At first, over 1,000 acres in my area, from ag to LI. They have no idea how they're gonna improve the roads over there, to do any of that. And these, you know, so I would say a lot of that should be handled by the, you know, the planners there, to try to influence that as you're going through site plan, and you discuss that as you're going through the process. But you gotta have people that have that in mind and are not overly influenced by the Economic Development Office, frankly. It looks like they've had a very heavy hand in what's being proposed. I actually sat and listened to an answer the other day on the IW2 plan, when it was brought up about the fact that they didn't have water, and the planner's response was, well, these don't necessarily have to have public water. They can be industry like big storage yards or things like that. And so I'm supposed to believe that's the big economic development promise we have, and we're sacrificing, you know, 500 acres of farmland so you can have a placeholder for someone who might come there later if they can ever get the water supply there. So right there, you'd see that farmland go, and maybe be a a lot of it be a parking area, a big storage area. Same folks that wrote the green, same folks that wrote that plan.
I understand that, but that's their job, is to plan, and I don't wanna comment on the IW2 plan, cause it's just not my area of expertise. What I am commenting on though, is the fact that this county, just prides itself. I mean, if you wanna buy a house here, it tout the Catoctin Mountains and how nature.
Well, so in general, the answer is planning, is comp planning. We do not do good, in my opinion, we do not do good comp planning here. So if something was just 2 years ago, this area was just comp plan ag with no planned water and sewer service, how did IW2, I know you didn't wanna hear about IW2, how did IW2 just stand it on its head, and now because a certain out-of-county developer buys it, it's a great idea to make it LI. Yeah, that is not planning. I think we do a horrific job at this point. That they're basically sticking their finger up and see which way the wind blows, and what the Economic Development Office tells them. I'm not persuaded that any of the stuff they're saying, I believe in economic development, we do wanna have jobs here, but just because someone says, oh, we think this is gonna bring these jobs, show me why you're saying that. I haven't seen any evidence of what they're saying is gonna turn out to be the case with this plan. But you gotta get back to good comp planning. To me, we should be looking at the regions. We used to do comp plans by regions. And then, you might do a little more small area planning. And then you stuck to it till the next time. So you had a more considered approach to this if you were looking to make dramatic changes. They're just constantly shifting, making dramatic changes. For something that, like I said, we just comp plan as open space, ag, whatever you have. And we do have a lot of steep slopes, and frankly, I have clients that really hurts them, that they won't let you do anything with your own property. You can't even build a house. So they do push that stuff. Yeah,
there's logic behind this stuff. It's not, it's not raw land, let's just.
No, I'm not talking about like, you clear cut it, but I'm saying it basically, they also interpret things at times that aren't the case. So that I've seen that on the other hand, but basically, the answer is by sound comprehensive planning and preserving. And I don't love this term. I think the general logic about it makes sense, smart growth. You try to plan the growth around your existing municipalities, and that does make sense. I just think at times they take it too far, because you see some of this density, and I don't wanna offend anybody who lives in Urbana, cause I'm sure it's turned out nice, but I remember years ago thinking, I pull up, look at the news post, and above the fold, they have a big article about Urbana, and then an article about smart growth. I'm like, do you realize they had extend water and sewer probably 8 miles to develop that, simply because someone had a PUD drawn on there? You know, that's done, that's not gonna get reversed, because someone had a PUD drawn on there in 1960 or something like that on the plan, but it wasn't smart growth. So, you know, I think you gotta be able to stick to your guns. You make a plan, and then you stick to your guns on the comp plan, and that's, you know, if you decide you're gonna have agricultural heritage or, you know, preservation areas, you stick to it. Don't make a deal, and then, or don't do things like that, and then just throw it out the window because certain people come in the door to
So
do
what
that.
do you see as the county executive's role in preserving green infrastructure? Because I see a plan, I don't see an implementation.
Well, you're right, it's easy to plan all that stuff and then you're not doing it. I see the role is the staff, so I'll see the idea of charter government was the county executive is the administrative or executive branch, the council's the legislative branch, so you can certainly propose things, and then you can have staff make presentations to the council as to how you accomplish that and carry those things out, so you take it from the plan to being implemented. That's your role.
Yes, and, so I,
Yeah, then I'll get you out. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm hearing a lot of general questions and things like that. Say that I vote for you. Okay, let's say that you get into this position. All right, and I'm talking about someone that's not a Republican anymore, but given what we've experienced with our previous, or our current county executive, I'm here and I'm listening. Let's say you get your position. What are you going to do? Day one, what are the tools available to you? What are your plans on if you achieve this county executive position?
Well, let me state, I think probably the biggest issue, has been the biggest issue for a long time in this county, and having been a lifelong resident, is growth. So day one is to start looking at the comp planning and what we're doing, and look at what's in place. Look at what is actually required by state law. And then you start to go to work on the comp plan. I just don't have a very good view of what's taking place right now, so that would probably be the first thing I'm gonna start on, is looking at the comp plan and how we get back to me more common sense in how we do that and how we carry it out, and we don't just change the plan willy-nilly, which I think is kind of what's been happening now. Then, you know, on other areas, not necessarily growth, I've gotta look at how we justify certain costs and expenses everywhere in the government. How does that affect you every day? And that's where I'll start, is looking at those things. And, you know, fortunately for me, I do know a lot of people, staff, know a lot of people work there, so I think I'll be able to hit the ground running pretty well. Not a big fan of transition teams, and there'll be a few people I know I didn't run for office to have a bunch of other people tell me what I need to do. I ran for office because I have an idea, I think, what needs to happen and what I need to carry out. And so, I don't wanna be a career politician. I wanna get in like I was mayor. I wanna get in and carry out what I think needs to be done to get the county going in the right direction, refocused on core local government functions. One of the most important functions is sound land use planning. So that will be very high priority for me.
I have a question about rural legacy, and that's been a real issue, is that some of this land, that may end up, well, hopefully not into data centers, and maybe even with IW2, which I'm not that familiar with, but, there's an issue, that has been brought up to me in farmers I've talked to, that land that is in the rural legacy overlay, so to speak, but it's not yet in rural legacy, if enough of that ends up being industrial or residential, but mostly they're talking, this administration's big on industrial, that it could affect the state, approval of rural legacy land going forward. It could threaten, farmers' ability to get into the state rural legacy area. And so, maybe somebody who's more conversant with the rules could add more to it, but if you got in as of day one and it's like mid-January, what would you do to look into where things are with the rural legacy and
Well, I
preserving
think
things?
you gotta look at, and I did have the different programs where you can, going from there to buying, the installment purchase program, the CREP thing, so I think we gotta look at that. I think one thing is, if we're serious about preserving our rural, our agricultural heritage, we need to step up the funding and find other sources. Now, that may be a whole lot easier for me to stand up here and say, to have it done, but frankly, I would look at some other fundings that's going other places that I don't consider the money being spent all that well. And maybe if it's legal, I gotta always check that, maybe diverting some of that funding to, the ability to buy, some of the things. I think one of the problems maybe with the rural legacy, do you have a landowner that's willing to do that? We gotta look at where we're putting that to make sure it's realistic that we're gonna have an opportunity to preserve that property. You've been waiting on that.
No, I wanna hear your views on non-disclosure agreements. So back in 2019, the head of the Office of Economic Development signed a non-disclosure agreement that the company involved and the county considered to be binding on all county employees.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Back in 2019, the head of the Office of Economic Development here signed a non-disclosure agreement with the big company. And the company and county government considered that NDA to be binding on all county employees. What this opened up was several years of essentially backroom meetings between representatives of this company, county planning staff, county legal staff, Department of Public Works, roads people, all these meetings going on in absolute secrecy. Because this NDA was blessed by the person that was then county executive.
Yeah,
I
well.
wonder what your views are on
So in general,
NDAs
so
in
I
county
can
government.
I can understand if I'm a business and I have a trade secret or something coming in, but overall, that, things like that and, public information requests, unless it's in litigation, and there may be some, unless it's an employee issue, the people who are elected to office or designated directors do not own that building and what's going on do. The people in Frederick County do. So that should be pretty much an open book. The county should be an open book as far as what's going on there, because that's, the person who is the county executive or council or director of economic development, I don't think they should have the right to keep information secret like that. That whole operation is paid for by the general public. The general public should have the right to know the information, know what's going on there.
Follow up to Steve's question, what exceptions to that can you
Well,
imagine?
I would, not on it, but say you have something that's litigation, obviously you can't talk about pending litigation. Or if you have a personnel matter, you can't talk about it. And there may be a few other things, but what I kind of referenced, say you have someone that's coming in town and it's, maybe it's closer to being an area, for instance, it's already zoned right and all that thing, and they don't want to give away too much information to their competitor. There may be a limited case, but I don't know why the economic development director is signed into that. That better be the county executive, and it better be after they've gotten advice from the county attorney. So I don't know what the process was there, but I have no idea why the director of economic development would be entering into agreement like that. They should not have been, in my opinion. If it was on their own call, that should not have been their call. Yes, Eleanor.
That goes into transparency. There is a lot of discussion that this council and this executive is very limited on her transparency with the community that is demanding answers. You have several different, areas represented here. You have housing, you have agriculture, you have data center, you have government involvement. How do you plan on being, what is your plan of transparency? How do you plan on getting your messages out? I know that we see these little tiny signs go up down the street, 30 days before there's a hearing, and you really gotta pull over, get out of your car, and look at it in order to find out what's going on. And that's how, unless you see the little sign, you don't know what's happening. Do you have another way to be more transparent with the community?
I had the same issue in this with, again, my favorite plan, IW2. They put out signs that one was back at Dead End Road, which I happen to have a farm at the end of that dead end road, so I saw it, but no one else on the road would see it. They put for 1,000 acres, they had 4 signs up. They were, a couple of them were on roads that went back, they faced the other way. That's problematic. On the other hand, you put signs in the major parcel of Beaver Zone owned by the not mentioned owner from down the road that just bought the property. Not one, he had more frontage than any other property within the zone, not one sign on that property. That wasn't by accident. So that should not.
Illegal?
I think they can, under their rules, they can say when they're doing public posting, they've made rules, but they are in a little bit of a difficult spot because I saw some things that looked like it was advertised when I was reading up on some of these plans, and I don't know where they're putting it out. I know it's probably tough to say, we try to reach as many people as we can, so I would say they should do it, and I'm not a big social media person, as you know. They should put it on social media, they should put it in all the available forms, put it in the news post, probably not much good anymore, they probably still have to do it, because I don't know how many people still get the news post and read it. There should be announcements by probably the county executive when you have things like that, so you're right. I always laugh though, people who stand up and say they're gonna be the most transparent, politician ever, usually end up being the least transparent politician ever. It goes back to my answer, stuff that's going on there, it's not your, it's the people's house kind of thing. Everybody should know what's going on there. And if you have a good reason for what you're doing, you ought to be able to articulate to people if you get questioned about it. If you're worried about getting questioned about why you're doing something, maybe it's not such a great idea. And you gotta understand too, not everybody's gonna like you. So sometimes you're making calls that you gotta be willing to face that. So you just can't hide stuff. Yes, sir.
I do have an education question, but I want everybody to piggyback off of these questions first, so we can.
Saving the hard questions for last. Huh?
Yeah, I got you, I got you.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
As a candidate, are you willing to make a commitment that if elected, you would set up a working group to make recommendations that the county charter be changed so that ordinances would be subject to referendum?
Yeah, well, I tell you, I was on, I'll be honest, I regret it. I was on the charter writing committee, and I had a reporter tell me that a judge actually went to the point of reviewing videos of the committee in order to make a decision on the legislative intent. Yeah, I have no problem, because the charter needs to be reviewed anyways. And I will tell you, you asked me what one of my first things I do. Let me backtrack a little bit. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back and look and see what we were paying for government when I was county commissioner, and maybe some way of population and what we're paying now. I'd really be interested in see how much more charter governments cost us in addition to reviewing the charter. But yeah, the charter needs to be reviewed. When problems like that come up, you need to put together a group and fix it.
Do I take that as a
Yes.
specific yes?
Yes, yes, yeah, you've got to review the charter, and I do think there, I'll be honest, when I was on that group, I probably had a little bit of a myopic view. I thought it would work a lot like the city of Frederick, where the aldermen really questioned the mayor and pushed back. That just has not, in my view, that has not happened here, and even though it's a position I'm running for, the executive really seems to have too much authority and leeway. Not that I won't use it if I need to make fixes, but I'm gonna use it only in a good way. Elise.
You brought up a good point just now, so I thought you could expand on that a little bit. what I like that you just said is you gave accountability. Everyone makes mistakes, and you said how you would change and you would do that different. And I thought you could expand on that, because some people are going, oh, well, he did this then or that. I like when people, when they feel they should have done something different, that they say, hey, I should have done this different, and take accountability, and I like that, and I want you to expand on that.
Well, when I was on the charter review, I thought it was the committee, for switching to charter government, I really thought it'd be more efficient. I tried to put myself in the shoes of a director, that worked at the county, and you're answering to five bosses, not one, and I was a city engineer. I knew how, I know it was when I had aldermen pepper me with questions, and it was contrary to, what my boss wanted. So I was thinking it'd be more efficient that way, and so that was a mistake I made, thinking it would work that way. It has not, in my view, worked that way at all. It has not been more efficient. Right away, it got to the point where and I think it'll get further that way, the council wants their own legal staff, the council wants their own budget staff, and then you just see the cost exploding. And I know this wasn't a topic brought up, but a lot of people raise this whole business with the county police force. You think the taxes are bad now, wait to see what happens if we get a county police force. So, and I will note, but during the charter review committee, no one on that, regardless of political affiliation, was in favor of a county police force. Get you again, I'll go back, Robert, and then you can see.
Perhaps next, just following up on Laura's larger question, given that the referendum failed, and we do know that there are data center developments being built now, how would you address, once elected, this question of the larger overlay zoning area, given that more than 10% of the voting population of the county is against it?
Let me tell you a general principle that you won't like. You think I'm going the wrong way with this. You can't do zoning by, I remember there was a saying by county attorney, you can't do zoning by plebiscite, which means you can't necessarily allow the public just to overrule something's right. They're way out over their skis on this. I don't think we have the water supply. I don't think we have the water supply to finish what's on East Alco. I have some knowledge about that because like I said, I worked with the county on getting that. So I didn't probably get it out the right way. I'm absolutely in favor of very minimum to what the planning commission approved. If the council, it's gonna have to be the council to do that. If the council does that, I will, obviously work with them to accomplish that. And then we gotta go back and look at how whatever promises were made were kept. I think one of the problems was the county jumped into the same, I think partly because the governor wanted it. And because they've got a huge budget mess there, and I would say the same thing for the MPRP. The governor wanted it. He might try to say now he doesn't, but he did. And we didn't look at the impact. So a deal was made before they had any idea what all the impacts were.
Yep.
So I think we got to go back and look at what all the impacts were, and to the extent there were not, solid agreements about what contributions were going to be made, if there's further development even on the campus that's there now, to the extent it's not too far down the path. I do have some experience knowing at what stages you can require certain things, and you are legally limited certainly during the site plan. But to the extent there's an opening, we got to make sure commitments are honored. I have a huge concern with it as well, because I don't know that, I'm not an expert on data centers, but it occurs to me that the technology is rapidly changing. So if we build up these huge budgets thinking we're going to get all this income from the data centers, and in 5-10 years that evaporates, that could be a horrible crisis here, particularly if a lot of that money goes to FCPS, because their budgets can't be wound back down very easily. So that would potentially put the county into having to do draconian cuts at the county in order to address budget situations. So I think we've gotten, again, way ahead of ourselves. So to be clear, yes, the CDI would need to be, if the council does that, we need to, that will be honored, and we need to also look at how to demand, promises that were made even are kept as far as providing.
Not having the overlay.
No, I think that has to be pulled, but we just,
Yeah,
you know,
pulled
I think it
back.
answers itself
Yeah.
with the water, but yeah, it has to be pulled back, like I said in the post,
Right.
at a minimum to where the planning commission approved, but I don't even know they have enough water to finish what's on where the East Alco
Yes.
facilities were now. I think they're gonna be stopped, and are we gonna sacrifice everything else we're doing in this county to, put into what might be a very short-lived game?
It's already happening across the
Yeah.
country where they're not realizing the consequences.
I'll get back to you.
One second, Jeff, just, so let's make a point, because we're in this lane here a little bit. To the best of my knowledge, 11 of the 14 candidates that are running for county council have signed the referendum, okay? I think even if you went to the favorites to win, I don't think there's any real question that you would get 4 votes minimum, the way things look, by the county council, okay, to overturn the decision that was made in December. From things that I hear, is the county executive can help grease the skids a little bit by making the process smoother.
Sure.
Whether through the planning department and things of that sort. So if you're committed to
I
whatever
am.
decision that the county council make to support them 100%, all right, then that's a very good
I'll be ahead of
position.
them, we're gonna start looking at adequate
You'll be
public.
ahead of them, all right. I get a
I'm
feeling-
gonna be ahead of them, because we're gonna look at what the question are as to the adequate public facilities.
That's even better.
So
That's
are we doing something that's gonna cause all of us to pay a lot more in our electric bills, which are already going up? Again, I just think we gotta, maybe there's some other answers there I don't know about from them that make the picture look better, but the problem is we didn't know, I don't think, before we jumped into this deal. And then you start, having listening sessions after the fact. That
Yeah, it's
doesn't
crazy.
address anything. It just doesn't, it's like and I don't wanna get into personal attacks or anything like that, but the EOs were, they weren't worth the paper they were written on. If you, even without those without something that pulls site plans, if someone started today and had a site plan they wanted to present in any of those areas, they couldn't have that submitted by December 31st, 2026 anyways. It's a huge process, so it didn't do anything more. Likewise with the electric thing, it did nothing more than was already put into state law, and everything that's already there was already, or in the process, was exempted out. So they just didn't do anything. It was they were just kind of like the listening sessions
Well,
after the fact.
If I may, the second part of that, and I think Steve referenced it, is about not knowing enough about what you needed to know to make these decisions. The public knew even less, okay? So if the people in charge were not as informed as they could have and should have been, and been responsible enough to know all the downsides of the situation, and were solely concerned with the economic development department running the county, thinking about revenue, no matter what the people want. And then they kept that process as secret as possible. By the time it came to the people here who stood up, the ship was already left the port.
Well, frankly, I'm not even convinced that the council had all the information they should have had. Maybe the council did not have the information that would have gotten you a vote to either stay with the planning commission or do that. And you're right, the economic development people should not be making that call. They have a role, there's no doubt about that. But if you're county executive of this county, your priority, or your main priority, should be the people who live in this county, not the governor of Maryland.
And that goes back.
And you gotta be respectful to the governor, but, I don't want him telling us we gotta have data centers here, and I don't want him telling us we have to have this many housing units when we don't have schools, we don't have roads, and we don't have water, so.
Yeah.
Unless you've got answers for that, you can keep that to yourself,
That's fair.
Mr. Governor. You had a question I never got to.
Yeah, but he was first.
Okay, Rob.
Okay, you were elected mayor of Frederick City. There aren't that many farms in Frederick City.
There were still some.
I've got a farm. Every year I get a couple of letters from a solar company asking me if I want to put solar panels on my property, they would pay me to do so. Are you gonna be the farmer's friend in that you're running for the whole county now?
Yeah, I will be. I don't know I get those letters, and I throw them away, because I just don't have any interest in it. But I know some people, that's an option for them. I don't know the environmental, I'm not up to speed enough on what the environmental impact is of the solar panels, you know, but I know a lot of people have had some interest in it, and it's a way they can hold on to their land, and still get a little income out of it. So I think, again, it's something you look in the zoning ordinance, and I think they've had probably quite a bit of regulation and zoning, I guess, application or, you know, discussion of solar panels, so. But I'll tell you, one of the things that also prompted me to run, you're talking about farmers, if you're not a gigantic farmer, you pretty much gotta be entrepreneurial to make it. And a friend of my daughter's that works with her at the hospital, it's a young couple kids, and it's not a small farm by any means, 180 acres, but the husband works doing custom farming work and spraying, and she works as a nurse in order to make it. So they were gonna open a farm stand. And of course, the Office of Agriculture was, oh yeah, we got a process for that, and we'll do that. Well, it didn't work that easy. What did they have to do? They had to hire a lawyer, me, to get them through the process. That should not be happening for a simple farm stand. And I see them doing that. They talk the talk, and then they don't walk the walk, because they run into a buzzsaw of planning and zoning. And these, I'm not talking about issues that I think are great public health, safety, and welfare. I know a woman who started one of these, you know, like pumpkin patch type businesses, and because their farm shrunk from, they had 90 acres, but the land they could lease, they had a couple hundred acres they leased, and that started disappearing to developments. So she came up with this idea to do this, you know, one of these agribusiness things, and and I watched her have to convince her father. It was a tough sell for him. Then she had to move because their family farm had to be sold because their other family interest. She moved to another location, and she has gotten nothing but hassle. This woman works her fingers to the bone and gets nothing but hassles from Frederick County. So yes, you know, obviously, again, I've been on both sides of the fence. I was a city engineer. I understand the whole role. You know, you're there to protect.
So in
public
four,
health, safety, general
in
welfare.
4 years, they're gonna say Holtzinger is the farmer's friend.
Heck yeah. I'm a small farmer. I'm a small farmer myself, so not on anything in any great scale. So I understand some of the challenges they go through, but yeah, I do. It's an irritant to me when I see saying one thing. You know, we're going to preserve our agricultural heritage, and when smaller farmers that are doing exactly that try to be a little bit entrepreneurial, they just run into a buzzsaw. Now I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I'll get you back here in a second.
I was giggling a little bit because my question is also about solar. I know you mentioned the energy crisis. I'm gonna out myself a little bit that I work for Howard County, and my boss is like the absolute genius that did Howard County's power purchase agreement, saved the county $90 million over the life of the agreement. It's a 30-year agreement, and working close to her and kind of being engaged in the energy industry a little bit, I know that no other energy generation is really that possible for us. New gas turbines are on a 10-year backlog, I think. Right now, small modular nuclear reactors are touted a lot as a solution, but have never been done in the United States. And obviously coal is just about the worst thing for human health. So I'm curious if you'll support the Division of Energy and Environment and their efforts to, you know, help the county be energy efficient, save the county money, invest in renewable energy when it makes fiscal sense.
Well, as a general in the county, doing what your boss said, a different thing. I had a gentleman that worked for me at the city of Frederick, had been the vice president of a construction at Children's Hospital, and we just didn't, for instance, in health insurance, we just didn't take what was offered. He negotiated, and I don't think they knew what to do, and we got much better rates. And he did, and I'll tell you, someone else who couldn't stand him, the Keys, the Frederick Keys couldn't stand him because he negotiated with them. So you're right, things in those areas, yes, and if there are things that make good sense, absolutely, I'll support it. Now, I'm not saying that it'll be that certain division, but it'll be within a division in the county, though. So if we have opportunities to save, and we can save the county money by saving our energy bills, absolutely. And if we can do things that make sense, you know, as far as solar, certainly, we would support that. I just want to make sure that everything we do is justified, you know, by some
Yeah.
type of cost benefit analysis.
And they do help residents as well. I just want them to be protected if there's a Republican administration.
I will be very direct. If I don't see day to day what you're doing to help people, that
Well,
to
that's
me is a
fair,
concern.
but
So
yeah,
I
you'll
need to
see.
see justification. That's, I
They'll
see-
justify
I
it.
I see a lot of manuals being printed, you know, the planning manuals, and a lot of times it's just a tremendous amount of fluff, and then the
Mm. Yeah.
minute something, they just don't honor it when it comes down to doing the plan. So to
Mhm.
me, when you do all that, and you spend a lot of time and staff time, that's not a good use of taxpayers' dollars. So that's how I would also respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So would you make it easier for Frederick farmers to install solar farms on their farms? Would you work on legislation?
I would certainly-
that
I would-
pull
I would
in?
certainly-
I mean, what is your feeling on solar?
I would
farms?
certainly look at, I'm not familiar enough with what's in the ordinance now, but I certainly would look at that, yes, because that is an option where you can still keep the land, and it looks like there's been a number of pretty big solar fields, that have gone in, so, yeah, certainly. Anywhere we can make the process better, but we're still doing what we need to do to protect public health, safety, and welfare, and they're not mutually exclusive. A lot of times, you have these processes that are way longer than they need to be, and they're not doing anything more to protect public interest. So where we can improve on that, absolutely, we need to do that. Yes, ma'am.
You've emphasized your focus on the local, on the county. Frederick County seems to be almost an island. All the counties, or most of the counties around Frederick County now have moratoriums on data center development, for instance.
Yep.
So my question is, how would you look at the sort of environment, the region, and some of the shared concerns? Because air quality, water supply, all of those things don't stop at the county.
They don't, but I would probably focus in more on just what's going on here. I think it's gonna stop itself. I do, because I think we got big issues. For instance, I think there's many other issues I think need to be, you know, that are concerns of the data center. But if you really look at what our withdrawal permit is versus the legal obligation to the city, Dietrich, and then what's gotta be serviced already around this county, I don't see it going further. So they may pretty much have a moratorium by that. But on just data centers, I'm careful when I throw out the word moratorium, because again, like I was answered before, that can be something that applied to a smaller business. If you're not very carefully crafted, could easily put someone out of business. And so, but with regard to the data centers, I agree that we gotta go back and look at all that. And if we do not have adequate public facilities to service it, they should not be able to go forward.
Well, a lot more than data centers go regional.
Go, say that.
A lot more than data centers are affected, like the housing impact. Housing doesn't pay for itself.
Right.
So, you know, you have to get your revenues elsewhere. And you mentioned cost benefit. The costs haven't been studied enough.
I agree.
The benefits are out there,
Yeah,
maybe
I
they're
agree.
true.
That's a bigger topic with housing,
Yes, it
particularly
is.
high-density housing does not pay for itself. What I always understood to be the best tax deal for the county are farms. Little in the need for services, and you're still getting tax money off of them. Now, they don't pay as high taxes, but they really cause very little for the need of services. So right there's a business reason why we should preserve as many farms as we can. But, you know, there is gonna be development there. You do need some housing, but I think, that is something you do have to weigh. I'll just move on to, you had a question.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to unleash your civil engineer persona here. We've had discussion about how we're gonna have economic development and low-cost housing and high-cost housing and data centers. All of those take what's now pervious surface and turn it into impervious surface.
That's right.
And data centers on top of that are huge consumers of water. Water has already come up as being a limiting factor to things that we can do in Frederick County because there's just not enough of it. So my question is, what could we do in the way of stormwater management so that we protect the green infrastructure that's important to some people. We increase the available water supply both to the environment and to the people who need it to consume it. We don't just put water in pipes and dump it in the river, knowing that already the Monocacy River is the major source of sediment for the entire Potomac Basin.
Well, you do have to do exactly what you're saying now when you're going through the process. So many times, a lot of the stormwater issues are from older developments where the standards weren't as stringent. So, I will tell you as someone who has to do, I practice in that I do think some of the stuff that we do now, in Maryland is well intentioned, but it's pretty goofy and actually probably is counterproductive because we don't do enough of storing the volume. We have practices that they put on smaller scale, and I think many times they become clogged, and then you're just flowing out, untreated. So rather than going back to areas where you're holding a bigger amount of water, we can actually get in and maintain them, but I'm getting into the weeds. So basically what you're saying is right. We need to do things to make sure before the water gets back to the river, it's clean, or we're putting water back into the ground that is getting filtered. And so that is absolutely one of the principles of stormwater management design when you are doing that. Another thing I didn't really bring this up, but one of the answers that they may have on the water supplies, well, we're gonna increase the allocation off of Potomac. And maybe that'll happen, but I'm not sure that's gonna happen because the folks that regulated the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin are starting to raise alarm bells. I think for the year 2035, even with releases from the Great Seneca Reservoir, that there's not enough water gonna be left in the Potomac to maintain aquatic life. So if we are looking to, the answer to that question is, we're just gonna get a more allocation. We're up against Montgomery County, DC, Northern Virginia. I don't think we're winning that one. And so I don't think they ought to count on it. And that's that you mentioned the Monocacy. The reason the city had the problem it did, I might have said this earlier, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. The Monocacy does not have enough water in it to honor what the city's withdrawal permit was and still maintain aquatic life. So while the city many times can still draw on the Monocacy, it cannot be counted on for planning and permitting. We don't want to get in that situation with the Potomac where we've over allocated, what we can do. And I see a lot of that with the planning when we're moving forward with rezoning things and we have no clue. You can engineer a lot of things to get the water and sewer there. It might not make great sense, but you can make it work. But do we have the ultimate capacity? And I think we're moving forward on stuff without knowing the answers to those questions. Another problem is, already, if it's not in place, it's gonna be soon. When the bigger transmission line was brought up from the Potomac, the old transmission line was converted to a wastewater outfall because the Ballinger-McKinney wastewater treatment plant, Ballinger Creek is already at its capacity to assimilate wastewater. So some of the treatment that takes place is when you're dumping the water out, treated wastewater out into the body of water. So we've got some limitations there as well. So the Potomac is only eventually gonna be able to take so much treated wastewater. So we gotta make sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves on that.
Pushing back on that just a little bit, last summer the Potomac River was running 800 CFS in September against withdrawals from all of the municipalities that you mentioned. I mean, basically it was negative there. And I understand the engineer's appreciation for large projects that are easily maintained, but I'm not sure that it can be proved that large projects are more effective than many, many small projects. And to say, we're gonna build this big thing and it's gonna solve all our problems seems to be a political solution that often doesn't play out in terms of power generation and a lot of other things.
I'm talking into the weeds about stormwater ponds and things like that. So what happens a lot of times is when you're doing the environmental site design stuff that's required under the Maryland Stormwater Management Ordinance, you have a lot of very small facilities in the back, row of townhouse of the easement, and I just don't think they get maintained very well. And so my concern is a lot of these facilities is they get clogged, very difficult for local governments to be able to find that, cite them, go to court to force it. So that I'm talking about ponds where you have some wet ponds and some things like that. It's much smaller scale than the gigantic scale. For instance, I wouldn't want to see, we're building a data center, we're gonna have 20 infiltration trenches around the edge of the building, And then you've got all sorts of dust and everything else and stuff running off the pavement that clogs them up. That's kind of what I was alluding to.
Thank you.
Yes?
I'm gonna switch gears a minute. A lot of my friends, knew that I was coming to this meeting, so they asked me to forward on
Could you
questions.
speak up a little louder?
Okay. And a lot of that surrounds is funding and education. And in my research, or not my research, but just through looking through the websites and stuff, it seems like we have close to $971 million allocated to the budget. The tax increase was 21.5 million. That was to go to new funding. So we are nearing almost $1 billion in education funding. So we're like $8 million off of $1 billion. And a lot of people in the county say may still not be enough, and that you support maintenance of effort funding, which is concerning because they state that, several years ago we got into the position that we were in underfunded with education in the county because maintenance of effort funding. Are you willing to, first, can you state your position on that? And then secondly, are you willing to go over the maintenance of effort funding amounts if the county needed it? Are you gonna go up to that $1 billion if we need it?
Well, here's one of my answers where people will be kicking me because you're talking yourself out of votes. I have big concerns with how they're doing. Now, I'm all for strong public education. I think it's absolutely important for general society. My oldest daughter and her husband don't have kids, and they complain about paying taxes. I said, well, it is very important to have a good public education system, but there also has to be accountability, and I just don't think there's any meaningful accountability. So what I want to see is justification for for the expenses and the increases. They have gotten tremendous increases over the last 12 years. And my understanding is we're not performing well. My understanding is only, you have 40% that cannot read at grade level, 69% are not proficient in algebra. That's not acceptable. We've got to do better if we're gonna be putting, and even for people that are doing trade jobs or anything like that. I think it's very important that we support the, oh gosh, I'm losing the acronym, for the technical trade schools and predicate. I think that's a great thing.
You mean STEM?
No, STEM I think too. I think STEM is very important. Basically voc tech. So I think that's all important, but I'll give you a couple examples why I have a little bit of issue with maintenance of effort. I started watching this. I was representing someone at the Board of Education that, a matter they had. And the person presenting for staff said, well, we have $1.7 million in the budget for an expected increase in the student population. And they can't project that stuff exactly. That'd be very difficult to do. But later that year, there was an article that they had, they basically had a decrease in the student population. That was 2015, that's $1.7 million they didn't need that year. And that's been, that's 12 budget years. So 12 times 1.7 is a little bit of money.
But we are a growing county.
But they still got, so this is back then. So they got that automatically built into the next year's budget because of maintenance of effort. So 2 years ago, I was in to the budget presentation where the superintendent and the Board of Ed, the president of the Board of Ed said, we need $85 million over maintenance of effort, or we can't even do basic education. They didn't get $85 million over maintenance of effort. They got $37 million over maintenance of effort, which was less than half of the request. But again, that's $37 million more than they got the year before. Lo and behold, again, see an article in the year, central office created a brand new position, paying $150,000 a year. The job description was pretty similar to two other positions that were already here. So how is it that you got less than half of what you said you needed to even do basic education but yet you've created yet another position in the central office. So that's what I'm talking about, accountability. Now, if they come in and they say that we need this amount of money or we can't do this, if they show that, if they are able to show that they need it, absolutely, I'm all for it. But I just think they have not done a very good job of showing why they need the amounts, and you.
How do you get them to do that if FCPS and the Board of Ed, if they control their own budgets? and stuff
They do
like
to
that?
this point.
Yeah, how do you get?
To the amount that Frederick County, about half of your property taxes goes to, Frederick County Public Schools. And again, that's absolutely important, and, you have to say, you've gotta go through a real
So are
audit.
you proposing that the county?
I just think we need to do a much better job auditing where the money's spent, and they've gotta show, there are so many
Well, that
things.
creates another position.
What?
Somebody
No,
audited.
there is an auditor, there's an auditor there.
Somebody external.
There's an auditor there, but the,
Right, but we could just get rid of that, I don't know,
well, there's an auditor there.
sorry.
It's a hands-off,
We're gonna talk about a position that none of us know anything about.
It's a hands-off.
That need to be created for maybe the new circumstances of our world.
It's not, well, this isn't a new circumstance, this has been going on, there is an audit. I just think they're told hands-off.
Is it the council's position to control that auditor, or is it?
No, it's the county executive, of course, the county executive council. So, look, again, if they show they need all that money, I'm all for it, because it's a vitally important, it's important for the general public to have a good public education system. There's no two ways about that. We shouldn't, so I would see the teachers come in and I take their word for it, they were the lowest paid starting salary in the state. That shouldn't be the case. But if you look 3 to 5 years in, they're in the upper tier. So the data I saw said teachers were in the upper tier pretty quickly on, but at the same time, they should not be the lowest starting pay. And frankly, that goes for a lot of other positions there. It's not just teachers, there's a lot of positions that don't get paid. So I see the superintendent making representations, or sometimes the Board of Education president making representations, and then they don't take care of the teachers. To me, one of the worst things they have to deal with is all the nonsense that is pushed down from the administrations onto the teachers, where they can't control their
So will
classrooms.
you make this a priority?
Absolutely, I will, what it's gonna have to be conveyed is bring your budget, but bring your backup. That's all I'm asking for, and that goes for anything in the county. When I was a department head, I couldn't just go in there and say, I want $27 gazillion this year, I have to have it, and expect it to get approved. It didn't happen that way. I mean, we got things little as a vehicle cut out because they didn't see that we needed it. So I expect when you're bringing a budget, you bring all the backup. And I will tell you another area there too, and I will get to your question. The way construction's handled. Again, we don't have control of that, but I'm certainly gonna suggest there has to be better management of construction, there has to be better selection of school sites. That probably makes most people's eyes roll back in their head. That's where huge bucks are spent. When you take a bet, now, they are sometimes not in the best bargaining position when they're bargaining with a developer, but you gotta do a better job than they've done with a number of school sites. And the way these projects are managed, why aren't we doing template school? We need heating and air conditioning and the technical stuff, but do we have to have, the architect's signature design for every new school that we're building? And a recent example, I was telling someone that I heard him talking about elementary school 41, which I think is Linganore Creek. Heard staff members say, we've got a $1 million construction management contract we need you to approve. Well, why? You've got one of the biggest, best known GCs on the East Coast, Whiting Turner, building the school. You mean to tell me they can't say, are you on budget, or are you on schedule? So things like that, that's big dollars. So there's a lot of things I think that discussion needs to happen with FCPS, but obviously I want a strong public education system, but I also want to protect the people who are funding that as well, and that's by saying, bring your backup. You got your backup? You get it.
Yeah.
And then I'll get back to you.
Speaking of backup, I don't know how much the CE can do about this situation, but there's already been 2 MDE, hearings, so we can't do anything about the 167 diesel generators for a line. We can't, and right now we have a judicial petition against 99 that are gonna be kind of behind the school, and then another 99, we just had another meeting that hasn't been approved. So there's 2 that have been approved, 1 of the 2 that we're fighting, so the third, so now we're up to 365. So we haven't, they're gonna do enough permits supposedly to get up to 1,000 diesel generators in the first 1,300 acres. My question is, can the CE do anything before we go into MDE permit meeting 4, because they're not even looking at the cumulative effect? Can we start looking at cleaner energy instead of keep bringing in this old-fashioned dirty diesel? The diesel that they're doing is the tier 4 retrofit. It's not even factory new. So the tier 4 retrofit is a tier 2 with extra stuff bolt on to make it a tier 4, which is, we got carcinogens, we have particulate matter, we have so much dangerous stuff near us that it's freaking us out. It's freaking me out, it's freaking my friends out, we're very, very worried. If it wasn't for the diesel, we wouldn't be as scared as we are right now. And people go, oh, it's just for backup. It's not just for backup. We have to test it every few weeks. You know, you got the short stack, build-up situation. And also, just what the other day, we had no electricity. It'd be running 24/7. Some hot summers, 24/7. Cold winters, 24/7. Right now, we have April Miller with Senator Karen Lewis Young fighting the MDE for us together as a team, because, Wes Moore is like trying to fast track it, and they're trying to weigh them back a little bit with some legislation. Is there anything the CE, because I don't know, can do about this horrific situation? Because I know that you guys have something, you need to do something about the climate. And as a CE, you'll say, we're here to protect the climate, and our goals is this. Well, Fitzwater says, oh, well, I got us one electric fire engine. Well, you can't compare one electric fire engine to 365 humongous diesel generators that are gonna turn into 1,000. So what, as a CE, do you have the power to do regarding this unbelievable, disgusting climate issue that the previous administration has put us into?
So obviously, the MDE is under the governor, and they know who signs their paycheck. I think what you got to do ahead of it, you've got to advocate with the governor, say, hey, look, enough's enough. And the best thing you can do is advocate, similar to like advocating with SHA on 15. But you got to put together strong. You put together a well-documented letter and keep on pestering the living crap out of them. I think.
So you can keep pestering Westmore?
You can keep pestering them about doing, just like you keep pestering them about Route 15 and other things that are not under our control. But you've got to, I said pestering, but you got to do a good job advocating for that, and that's where you work with your local delegation to say, hey, look, we've got to do something about this. I can't do anything as a county executive other than write these letters, but if I get the backup, information from folks like yourself, and you send that, and then you develop momentum like April and Bill and Jesse have done, to maybe get the legislature to do something that will not be something you can override.
Just as a quick follow-up on what Elise just said, the technology is there now for flow batteries, which means you don't need diesels. Google is doing it, and some other folks are doing it. But as a CE, you can't demand that a company will come in and use flow batteries instead of diesels. But perhaps as a CE, you could sit down and say, sit down with me and let's look at how the things that are most upsetting about the diesel. There are many things upsetting about the diesel, about the data centers, and one of the biggest is the diesel generators. If you had flow batteries for the emergency backup, not only, and you'd understand this as an engineer, not only would it be available if there's a loss of power from the grid, but they can function both as a load and as a source of power. So when the data centers flip, they don't need this, they're not gonna process right now, but they've got all this power, they can send it to the flow battery, and the flow battery will then add as a source to absorb that. So they're not hurting the grid. They're not making all these carcinogens. There's no noise with batteries. They're not lithium, so they won't blow up or have a fire. So
Well-
the technology is there. So my question after blah, blah, blah is that, would you as a CE do the one thing that Jessica won't do? Will you call in AWS and say, sit down with me? Because you say you wanna be a good neighbor. These are things we'd like you to look into. If your boss, Mr. Bezos, he rented Venice for 3 days for his wedding. I think they could afford to look into this. And so the bottom line question is, dealing with these companies, the way, no offense to Jessica, but what Jessica does is, well, if this works for you, I guess it works for the county. This is not helpful to us. But what we need is a manager who calls in these guys and say, let's work on this.
That's kind of what I was talking about, a working county executive. You also can't delegate out of negotiating community benefits to someone else. That's the county executive job. I think you mentioned that, and it probably went over my head about the batteries. So yeah, if they are something that works, absolutely, you call them in. And you have a secret meeting that's not subject to a non-disclosure agreement. I'm just. So you call them in, but that's where experience. You got to know what buttons you can push. I'm going back to city war stories, but I had was reviewing some plans for development along Possumtown Pike, and Possumtown has a horrible vertical alignment. And one development, same developer on one side of the road, one on the other, and they were at the site plan or subdivision plan stage, and there's limits to what you can do, and you got to understand it. But the guy that was running the project, who was a lawyer, and sent me a bunch of cases on what the limit of the authority is, and he would call me up and say, "Did you read those cases yet?" I said, "No, I haven't had time. You still got to improve the road." So you got to be able to know what you can push, and that again comes from experience. So absolutely, you call if that technology is available and they're just choosing not to use it because it's cheaper, and given the impact that you've seen and the testimony from the people in the neighborhood, you do that. You call them in. Now you may have a limit on how far you can push them, but you got to be willing to put on your big girl, big boy pants and say, "This is what you're going to need to do," or it might not be the smoothest sailing on some of these things.
Can we hold off, for example, the 4th MDE meeting before they've even scheduled it to discuss something like Betty has mentioned? Is that a possibility?
That's where I don't know what the procedural status is right now. But if that's available, certainly you write a letter and said, look, we really want to discuss some of these things. There's other technologies available. We have a tremendous amount of concern for our residents. Again, if you're the county executive, your primary concern is Frederick County residents not digging the governor out of a budget hole. And he does, I mean, no offense against him, and again, you gotta be respectful no matter who the governor is, but does he really care about what happens to you guys?
No, not at all.
He doesn't, so.
No.
You, lady in the back of the room had a question, you had.
I often think about fee in lieu. And I wonder, with your background in, excuse me, engineering, why do we approve so much building and subdivisions and all sorts of stuff without adequate public facilities, and we just let developers pay their way to continue making our lives?
Well, that's where you have to, if that's.
What do you feel about
You have to,
fee in lieu?
if that's, there's for different features.
Changed in the county.
There's different things that fee in lieu of can be used for. They can be used for, for afforestation, they can be.
I know what it all can be used for.
Yeah,
I
so,
know how it
so if
is.
it's, so if
I'm
you.
wondering
You
if
go back
we
and adjust it.
always need to
Right, you go back and.
fee in lieu, always, go ahead.
You don't.
Reforest, overcrowd the schools, do whatever you need to do, as long as you pay.
First thing
You do.
you need to do is you need to look at the ordinance and see what it allows and what your authority is.
That's what
If the
I'm-
ordinance,
that's what I mean.
if the ordinance isn't strong enough, then you need to work with the council to
Right,
get a
and
better
how do you
ordinance.
feel about our
I'll tell you an
ordinance right
example of that where, When I told you I got an APFO brought forward in the city of Frederick, they had not been able to get one done. But one thing we didn't do the same as the county is our school APFO test was not as stringent as the county. I have one, I was just the mayor, wasn't on the alderman. I have wanted a stronger, to match the county's thing, but the city, the majority of the aldermen said, hey, we don't control school funding, blah, blah, blah. So they wanted something where you could, if you tested for 3 years and you didn't make it, you could go ahead in the 4th year. So there's reasons why people do that sometimes, and I didn't want that as an ordinance, but I understood what the alderman's reasoning was. So you gotta go back and look at, these ordinances and see if they're really carrying out what they're supposed to do. And if the fee in lieu of is not causing road improvements and things like that, of that nature to get done, then you've gotta make fixes to the ordinance.
Well, here's the fee in lieu. I mean, if they're being charged $10 an acre now, why shouldn't it be $10,000 an acre just because if they wanna go that way, then let them pay.
Yeah, same principle, and that's one of the things, that's probably one of the solutions also on the affordable housing. You make it pretty undesirable to not build some affordable, that's one of the tools that maybe the government can use. I think we still have limited tools, but you're right, that's the same principle. You go back and you look at the ordinance, and you make adjustments, and you've got, it might be some back and forth to see what works to really get it to, where you're getting the money you need. But another thing that I think we need to look into, I represent clients that have to pay tremendous impact fees, and you're $20-some thousand before you can build a house in this county, before you put a shovel in the ground. I wanna really look and see how the fees are being used. Are we doing a good job using these fees we're collecting to get public improvements done? And I don't know the answer to that. I think that's something that needs to be looked at pretty quickly. You had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, following up on your question, do you wanna change those ordinances to make sure that the builders can't get away with spending not spending any money, and also, is there gonna be any cap on building?
Well, that would basically be a moratorium. And so I get a little concerned, I'll be honest about that, because that, again, that can really send shockwaves through even small, all sorts of trades and everything else. So, and I will also say this, that's where you've got to test the waters to see what you get to the breaking point, and you gotta have the, desire to want to do that. I will say this, on the other side of things, it's not easy. It is a tough business to be in, and I do understand that if you're a builder. But the answer basically is you've got to test the waters. You got to go back and see what amount of fee you charge till you get to the point where they're not doing anything. And if you try to do that, you'll probably get called out in court for doing that. But
Well, a lot of people are really concerned about crime, safety.
Absolutely.
People coming in from, and I mean, honestly, I lived in a development that was getting built. I moved here in 2020, I live in East Church, and I watched several different developers build. And the people that were working on site every day, that were there all the time, were coming in from Alexandria, Fairfax County.
I don't doubt it.
They were coming in from Virginia.
I don't doubt
They
it.
were coming in from really far away.
So what you'll see happen is
But what I'm trying to tell you is how does that money support, how does that money, the money that builders are making, how does it support anybody locally?
It doesn't.
I mean, I feel like there is so much greed and payoff and handshakes and backroom bullshit. I'm sick of it. I am sick of it. And I'm a Democrat and a Republican.
Exactly.
I really am. I'm both. And I just can't stand what's happening. And all the laws that have gotten changed, the environmental protections are gone. I mean, DOJ slashed so much stuff. Our Health and Human Services, there's so many things that aren't getting challenged anymore. And so many laws that just keep getting changed. Are you against this administration's,
Well, I'm gonna focus on what I can do locally. So I can't do anything about a lot of those things, those laws you're referring to. What I can do is some of the local ordinances like the APFO and the impact fees and things like that. Now, I will say this, I was really for impact fees when they first came out, because generally, the higher density housing doesn't pay for itself, so the difference, they'll say, well, you're getting more tax base, but you're not getting enough tax base to cover the cost of services. So I'll get back to why that's relevant. So I would say you look at those fees and you adjust them to address some of the issues, but I don't, other than really supporting law enforcement, I'm not sure how, as a county executive, how you can stop the crime or people bringing in outside sources.
That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about that, but what I'm really worried about is how's Frederick County really benefit from all these houses that are being built that are crap? They're built on karst lands, what are those things called, sinkholes?
Yeah,
We've got them
yeah.
everywhere.
And it's particularly bad in that area.
Or two from the place across the street just fall into a hole one day. People are there. I mean, this is insane. We've gotta stop.
Well, so that goes back to your plan. So what you do is you go back to your plan and look where you wanna grow, where you don't wanna grow. In your case, it's too late because the city of Frederick already had a plan that they wanted to.
Well, how do we intercede with these plans? How do we, if we miss a meeting, or they make it too difficult for us to go, or we have to sign up ahead of time, or we have to, we have to sign up 24 hours ahead of time? That's bullshit.
It is a tough thing to go, and I had the same feeling when I went to the IW2 plan. They had plan after plan, and they put it off, and they put another voting off, and then it's very difficult to keep up with it. I don't.
Well, I wanna know how this building houses, or building schools, or building anything is gonna benefit the people of Frederick, the people that are working here.
Right.
Because as it is, everybody's driving down the road, right? So why not have some sort of a working agreement that, if this builder's gonna come in here and build, then they've gotta use, local labor. Yeah, it's gotta be 80% or they can't do it.
Well, I would.
Whatever, I don't care.
I don't think, I would tell you, as putting on my lawyer hat, I don't think it would be enforceable. I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I did it, the example I gave earlier, I used a local engineer to do a big capital improvement design project. I chose to keep stuff that was within my control. I chose to keep the money local. We were doing that, and I think that is gonna be somewhat the limit of your power. I hear what you're saying, but I don't think as county executive, or even the council could put in place laws that say in Frederick County, you can only use Frederick County labor. I just don't think it might sound nice, and I agree, you would rather keep money in the local economy, but to be straight with you, I'm not sure it would be enforceable. So what you do is a
25-mile, or 30-mile, whatever, something that really.
Could you do like a workforce initiative, if the builders were to come in and use like some type of incentive for them to have a workforce initiative?
Give them a tax benefit.
We need
Tax
those
benefits
big
out
guys.
like crazy, so we can.
you'll bring Lenny Thompson back out of retirement to say, no corporate welfare.
Okay, one at a time.
One other question.
One at a time, please.
This is quite related to her point. You had said how important it was to you to confine your operations to what benefits the community and the people who live in Frederick County. Your literature says that you want to fully support the sheriff's department. The current sheriff's department management is quite in favor of the 287G situations.
There's a law now.
They're now illegal from a state perspective, but you can still do these little arrangements. I'm not in favor of that, and I don't see how, as a county executive, well, let me just ask it this way. Washington County is going through hell with their ICE facility. What is your position as a county executive to protecting us from the overreach of the federal government?
Well, I can only control what the county executive controls. I do think we have a pretty safe community. I think that has resulted from, supporting the sheriff, that's the police agency for the county, supporting the sheriff's office. I would also note that sheriff's office does give money back from time. They don't always use all their budget. They do give money back. But I wouldn't have any control of ICE. I wouldn't have any control of, I don't wanna see them in city streets. Everybody should be treated with dignity and respect, and if becomes an issue, that has to be addressed. And the folks that if there's someone causing a problem, I do think it would be addressed. So I don't know that I have any more of an answer than that. I don't see that I would have a whole lot of influence over,
It's a sheriff question.
over, whether ICE would send something here or not,
It's an
but
attitude, who does the sheriff report to? It's an attitude.
sheriff reports to the voters of this county. And that's so, unfortunately, I think the answer is he has won election, he's people in this county have voted him back in, and you may not care for the policies, but the majority of the people in this county like how he has, what he has done as sheriff of this county, and so I'm limited in what I can do. He's an elected official. I'm not higher than the sheriff, and so that's basically my position on it. I want to see everybody treated with dignity and respect. And I think we do that in this county. I think this county is a very friendly county.
It's true.
How do you guys work together? How does the sheriff's department and the CD work together?
Basically, the sheriff's department has to get funding from the county. So it's basically a very similar arrangement to FCPS probably in the county, where it's an agency that gets its funding. And I think, even though I don't think the county executive and the sheriff have the same views on things, I still think they have a good working relationship. And you got to be able to have a good working relationship with people that aren't necessarily of your same political viewpoint. You're both in office, they're both elected officials, and they work together to try to ensure this is a safe community, and that's what you need to do.
I think that it's getting late, and we only have the room till 7:30, so I think unless someone has a really important question they need to get in before the last 7 minutes, I think what I can do is first of all, thank you very much.
I appreciate the opportunity, yeah.
Right? I especially want to thank all you guys out here. I've done a number of these things. This was tremendous. I think we got a lot of questions answered. I think you got something to take away that you learned from the people. We certainly learned a lot from you, so I want to congratulate the whole friggin' room, so God bless you. All right.
Well, I'm not sure I gave answers that everybody wanted to hear, but I don't want to ever represent something I'm not going to do in order just to get someone to vote for me. So I am pretty much focused on the core local functions of Frederick County government, and trying to do that as efficiently as possible and make sure we're doing the best job to provide, the local services you depend on every day. And by doing that, I think I can keep your tax burden from continuing to spiral upwards the way it has been.
Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
I just wanna add one thing, Jeff. I'm so appreciative of your willingness to say things that you can anticipate a lot of people in this room do not agree with. I really appreciate that, because it just engenders trust.
Yeah, well, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, that's for sure. I had a law professor that, I don't know if I should tell a story or not, but he found out. It pretty much describes me. He found out I was taking master's level classes in civil engineering when I was going to law school. So he was a crusty old guy who I really liked. But he said I was one of the barbarians from the engineering school. So that's kind of what I am. I'm a caveman / barbarian. But I'm gonna hone in on the basics of local government and try to do that well. And I also, and I will shut up after this. Probably not the teacher example you want to hear about, but I had a football coach my senior year at TJ. We were horrible up until the time he got there, and practice was probably 10 times harder when this guy got there. And before he got there, I thought, I had all these fancy reasons for why we lost. We were renting the I formation. Everybody knew where we were going. This guy came in. We did fundamentals, till the point where it hurt. But we were good at staying low. We were good at how we tackled. We were good at how we blocked. If you weren't within 2 inches of where you were supposed to be lined up, you were getting yelled at. And it turned out none of the stuff, we were less imaginative on our offense. Everybody knew where we were running. We pretty much just telegraphed it, but it was the fundamentals that made the difference. We were lower than other people. We were lined up pretty much perfectly every time. So unless you have the fundamentals right, you're not gonna do anything else right. So I'm a firm believer, and that has carried through on just about everything that I've gone through in my life to this point. You've got to get the fundamentals right, and we've got to get the fundamentals right in Frederick County government.
Like the Spanish soccer players.